All right. Uh, it's my understanding we have a lot of friends in the lobby joining by the minute. Uh, First and foremost, thank you all for making time today, either this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're calling in from. I understand we are covering the country today, and we're honored to do so. Speaking is Pete Levine, VP of Client Services at Civilian, the creative advertising marketing agency privileged enough to partner with CDPH to create the campaign that we're going to share with you today. Never a bother. I'll remind you again, but this presentation will be recorded, and we'll provide a link to that after. We will also provide this deck to you all after the fact, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. And with that being said, let's kick it off. So as I mentioned, we're here today for Never a Bother, the California Department of Public Health's inaugural statewide youth suicide prevention campaign. Regarding the use of the word inaugural, this is by no means the first suicide prevention campaign, but the first youth-focused that has been co-created. And we'll spend a lot of time talking today about co-created, and we look forward to jumping in. Next slide, please. First and foremost, please take care of yourself. This is a very sensitive, delicate topic. Suicide is, emotions may arise to the surface. Many of us are lost survivors, attempt survivors, and people who have lived with experience. Please make taking care of yourself a priority during and after the presentation. If you or someone you know needs support, call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Next slide, please. If you haven't already done so, please follow us. We have a lot of content out already and putting out new things every day. You'll see that we're just about everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. We even have a playlist on Spotify, so please join us if you like. Next slide, please. Now I want to go through the agenda and kind of tell you why we're here. We're here to take you through the background and overview of this campaign. We'll touch on our goals, share the research and strategy employed. We'll talk about the campaign concept, our launch, outreach, and engagement, some youth co-creation highlights. We'll highlight our mega influencer and that partnership there, and we'll discuss the campaign impact overall. And last, we will give you all the opportunity to ask questions and we'll provide answers. Please feel free to type them in the chat. Just know that we'll get to them at the end. Most importantly, though, is why you're here. Why you're here, we hope, is to learn about what we heard and what we did, with the hope you can apply the learnings to your communities, to leverage resources and materials to complement your efforts, and to extend the life of the campaign wherever it's needed. And as a reminder for those that just joined, we will be recording, and there's a link there as well. Next slide, please. The campaign team today, you'll see only 6 faces on this slide. I can assure you that you could multiply this by at least 10, and you'd start to get an idea of the amount of people it took to bring something like this to life. We're all tremendously honored to be the few here today. Just please know the list is long. We will introduce people as they speak. I already introduced myself, Pete Levine, Vice President Client Services with Civilian. And it is now my distinct honor to introduce Dr. Sohail Sood, the Director of the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, or CYBHI, and Health and Human Services Agency. Dr. Sood, thank you for joining us, and please take us away. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Pete, and good afternoon, at least from the West Coast to everybody. It's really an honor to be here. I appreciate your time, and I am here in part to ground this conversation with some sobering data. So we can go to the next slide. We are so fortunate that in this nation, children and youth do not die often. However, when they do, it is too commonly from suicide or homicide. And of course, behind each of these instances is that person, that beauty lost, that family and community that's heartbroken. Suicide is a leading cause of death. You can see it on the slide here, and generally speaking, it's increasing. This is the case nationally. Rates on this slide, as is depicted, increased by close to 50% from 2007 to 2021. And on the next slide, you'll see that that's also the case in our state of California. Between 2018 and 2022, of young people who died, meaning those between the ages of 10 and 24, 1 out of every 5 died by suicide. If someone shows up in the emergency room having harmed themselves, 60% of the time, that someone is age 25 or younger. Next slide. And these risks, they're not distributed evenly, right? The rates vary based on how you see yourself. Half of our young people who are transgender seriously contemplated suicide within the past year. And on the next slide, you'll see that the rates also vary by race or ethnicity. Young people identifying as American Indian or Alaska Native died by suicide at rates nearly 3 times that of most other groups. I'll also call out that the rate of suicide among Black youth, which you can see on this slide is already elevated, has been increasing the fastest. And what's a bit less clear here with this particular graphic is that because California is so blessed to have so many Hispanic youth, despite the lower rates you see on the screen here, the total number of Hispanic youth who died by suicide is higher than any other race or ethnicity in the state of California. Next slide, please. So none of this needs to be the case. It's not preordained. You'll hear in a minute from my dear colleague Darcy that suicide is preventable. We've been asked to do something about it. Youth have directly asked it to do so. And so in recent years, California is taking an all-in approach to prevent distress from turning into despair. We're attempting to surround youth with services and supports everywhere where lives are lived, investing billions into this enterprise, which is known, as Pete was mentioning, as the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative. And that in part means improving the healthcare system, right? Increasing the workforce, upskilling primary care providers, expanding the way services are covered. But we recognize that if you focus only on the doctor's office, you're pretty late in the game. So we're building out supports at schools and working closely with teachers and administrators. We're supporting community organizations, parenting programs, home visiting programs to really scale what works with trusted partners that are already respected by youth in the community. We are providing free connections to mental health professionals online, along with a number of other digital services. And I'm happy to talk more about all that, but here's the rub. All of this means nothing if young people don't feel like they can reach out, if they don't feel like they're worthy of getting help. And again, help doesn't mean always need to be the case of formal support. But there are times where we cannot muster the strength to stand, but we can lean. So we need more shoulders around us. We need to change culture. And I'm proud to be working with the California Department of Public Health and many others to do just that. So at this point, I'll pass on to Darcy Pickens from the Department of Public Health to speak a little bit more about the work we're doing to elevate the conversation around suicide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sood. My name is Darcy Pickens. Good afternoon, everyone. I am a program coordinator with the Office of Suicide Prevention here in the California Department of Public Health. Next slide, please. I just want to take a moment to frame this work in a few core concepts. The first being, as Dr. Sood said, that suicide is preventable. So our messages, discussions, actions, and support can help prevent mental health crises and can prevent suicide when mental health crises do occur. We also acknowledge that the causes of suicide are complex and involve multiple risk and protective factors at the individual, relationship, family, and societal levels, and that these factors can fluctuate and change over the lifespan, even just in those younger years. We know that suicide risk increases as the number and severity of risk factors increase, and the number of protective factors decreases. So throughout the work of this campaign, we look at how to flip those arrows you see on the screen here and acknowledge and support people at risk while also building on the protective factors that can support them no matter where they are on this kind of risk continuum. Next slide, please. Our campaign has three main objectives: increased awareness of suicide prevention and mental health resources, services, and support. This is both at the state and national level, and integrating local supports, promoting help-seeking behavior and other evidence-based suicide prevention strategies that are tailored to specific communities, and then genuinely reaching youth in their own voice in a way that breaks through the barrage of messaging coming at them all the time and really helps to fill a gap in traditional suicide prevention efforts. These three objectives drive three main desired outcomes: increased knowledge and awareness, not only of those crisis lines and external sources of support, but also things like knowledge of suicide warning signs and other ways to identify when there's need and support either themselves or a friend. Increased self-efficacy and belief that young people matter and are worthy of help and support and can identify and trust their support systems. And ultimately, an increase in help-seeking behavior. So they actually take action to help, again, themselves or a friend or a youth in their care, whether it is before, during, or after a crisis. Next slide, please. This campaign serves youth through age 25 with a focus on youth who are Hispanic, Native American, Alaskan Native, and/or Black African American, as well as their peer and adult allies. We also seek to support youth from these populations who also identify with some of those intersecting identities that Dr. Sood mentioned earlier: Two-Spirit, LGBTQ+ youth, youth having had mental health and/or substance use challenges, and/or having been impacted by the foster care system, just recognizing that suicide risk can be higher for youth with these intersecting identities. The focus of media in year one after launch in March of 2024 was on our youth audience with slightly more acute needs, those in distress, at risk for suicide, and then the people kind of in their immediate social circle, friends and peers. Year two expands out to be more inclusive of all youth, including youth under age 14, who we reach through their parents and caregivers. And this includes folks like aunties, grandparents, coaches, teachers, all of those adult allies. And then campaign materials are provided in both English and Spanish, and we gather input from youth and caregivers on which specific materials to have translated and in what quantities, so that that's really driven at the community level as well. Next slide, please. The core approach really driving this effort, you've already heard it this afternoon, is really co-creation with youth and their allies. And this campaign is pretty unique in that it combines traditional and digital media efforts with the work of our youth serving community-based organizations and tribal grantees. Those grantees help to ensure each aspect of the campaign is co-created by youth, amplified, by trusted messengers in the community who help to tailor messaging for their peers, and then is also paired with evidence-informed local youth suicide prevention projects that build upon and help to reinforce campaign messaging. Next slide, please. It has been such a privilege to be a part of a group with such a high level of collaboration and coordination and dedication from so many extraordinary partners. You see a few of them here. The Office of Suicide Prevention in CDPH provides primary oversight, but these incredible groups work very closely to turn the project into what you see today. Civilian leads our media co-creation, creative development and rollout, supports our youth advisory board, provides TA, and much, much more. Your social marketer also supports TA and helps make sure we're adhering to best practices in suicide prevention on all fronts. Youth Creating Change supports youth engagement and co-creation efforts as well. The Center at Sierra Health Foundation provides oversight and administrative support, to all of our 33 local grantee partners. Their ability to connect with these groups on the ground, support them, and help us learn from them has been absolutely critical. And then the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, Agile Visual Analytics Lab is overseeing our project evaluation efforts to help identify promising practices and replicable efforts. This combination of partnerships also, of course, includes youth and is pretty unique and has proven both effective and really powerful. Again, such a privilege to be a part of this team. And that's it for me. I'll pass it over to my colleague Camelia with Civilian. Next slide, please.
Everyone, my name is Camelia Mortazazadeh. I'm the Director of Strategy and Insights here at Civilian, and I'm so excited to be here and talk to you all about the campaign. This is an issue that, as Dr. Steed mentioned, is so pressing, but what a joy to be able to work on a campaign, and I think you'll be delighted to kind of hear about how we created it and what it's yielded. So with that, I'd love to walk you through, at a very high level, a lot of the research and strategy that went behind a co-created campaign. What does that really mean? And how did that come into practice for us here at Civilian and with our partners? So if you go to our next slide, this is really giving you a high level of our research and development process. We worked a lot with our partners to first conduct a baseline survey to understand knowledge, awareness, perceptions, and actual practices that young people across the state have related to mental health and suicide prevention. So much of our work was informed by listening, and we'll talk more about that later. Really making sure we took the time, and luckily we had great partners at the state who really also valued that and let us take the time to do that well, to really understand what young people are going through, what are their perceptions and their barriers and their struggles, to get at the heart of what this campaign is truly about. Next, we really looked at co-creation. What does that mean? How are we working with young people to help them shape the creative look and feel, the messaging, the media strategy, the tactics we use to make this an effective statewide campaign? We really value our role and our partnership with the state and want to be stewards of the public dollars to make this campaign effective. And so we really wanted to make sure we did this well, but also really working with youth to make sure this is something resonant, and this is something that's going to be effective and actually compel action and behavior change. Looking at concepting and testing, this is pretty standard for lots of agencies, but knowing that so much of what we tested was created by youth, and we worked with youth across the state to really make sure that the things we made were going to be resonant across the board. And then we are continuously refining what we do with our advisory boards, our partners, and more in-person convenings. And then finally, we will be doing a full evaluation and survey this coming spring, and are excited to share those results with you all once we have them on our campaign. And if you go to our next slide, this is really a 10,000-foot view of the process and the steps to make our campaign. I won't go into all of these, but I do want to highlight, we had a pretty short time in which we had to work to kind of get the approvals that we needed to at the California Governor's Office. So really making sure we really doubled down and tried to reach young people all across the state in virtual and in-person formats to really understand that there's different ways young people learn and absorb messaging. We wanted to make sure that we do so in a way that is most conducive for them. And also knowing that we really wanted to focus our first year, our first launch on youth. The campaign has really two arms. It's content that is geared towards youth who are in distress and their friends. And then also last September, for Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, we launched our parent and caregiver component. And we have a lot more to come. Please make sure you do follow us and see what we have coming for May as Mental Health Matters Month. So next slide, please. So one of the first things we did, which was really key, is to assemble a paid campaign youth advisory board. And as Darcy mentioned earlier, we really wanted to look at young people who had lived experience and are among our priority audiences of our campaign, knowing that young people have a lot of intersectional identities and different experiences and have interacted with the mental health systems or supported their friends or peers in different ways. This group was so key to really assemble first, bring them along with a lot of our research that we did, but then ideate, co-create, and make sure they are our gut check for every single thing that we do. And I'm so excited today because we have Shaylin Dawkins, who is one of our youth advisors. He's from LA. I'll let him introduce himself, but he's here today as well to co-present with us because we also think he helped shape this work. It's important that our youth that we work with have a say in the work that we present. So Shaylin, I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much, Camelia. And hi, everybody. My name is Shaylin Dawkins. I'm 23 years old. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I love my city and I love my state. so much. I've been doing suicide prevention and mental health advocacy work since I was about 15. And when I first heard about the Never Bother campaign and just the opportunity to be on a youth advisory board for them and be involved with a co-created campaign, I was super excited. I've had the pleasure of being a part of the YB for a little over a year now, which is crazy to say. It's been one of the best opportunities in my life, and it's just been really amazing to work with like-minded adults and youth on this campaign who equally, just as much as me, care about mental health and suicide prevention. The board consists of members ages 15 to 24, and we're all across California, from the Bay all the way to SoCal. And the board is really an opportunity for us to have our voices heard at a level that isn't really often seen at all. I've worked on a lot of, different, I've worked with a lot of different organizations when it comes to suicide prevention and mental health advocacy. And with this campaign, it's been the most I've ever actually been able to work with a really focused and amazing experienced group of adults to create something that is for youth. And it is one of the first times I've really felt that the youth voice has been heard. So love Never Bother campaign and always will. Next slide, please. And back to Camelia.
Thanks so much, Shaylin. So you'll hear more from Shaylin talking about a lot of the youth co-created work later. But I'm going to kind of walk you through what that process meant. So when we say listening sessions, it was exactly that. We didn't have a set agenda. We had a couple of set of questions. We met with young people in person as well as virtually, and partnered with organizations that could convene youth, usually in the evenings or on weekends or times that are most convenient for them. And if you see in our photo here, one of the things we did too was really kind of look at other suicide prevention campaigns, specifically ones that were geared towards youth, and put them on poster boards and have young people get Post-its and really kind of give their thoughts. And one thing that is very humbling when working with young people is that they are brutally honest and they do not hold back. So they will tell you very candidly if they don't like what you're doing or they don't like how something looks. And it's very refreshing. It helps us get very clear on the direction. So that was one of the first things we did, but also really trying to get at the heart of what are those challenges? What are the things that young people in California are facing and going through when we think about mental health and suicide prevention? I can tell you more, but I want to play a short clip for you from one of our listening sessions we had that it can help convey what I'm talking about in a much better way. So we'll just play this clip real quick.
I used to think before that it was embarrassing to go speak to a school counselor because my parents immigrated here by themselves with nothing. Why can't I go through this, But everyone's battles are differently, and it's okay to seek help. And I wish that I didn't have that mindset instilled in me.
Thanks so much. And we have a lot more of our videos and content with youth on our website. So these are just short clips and teasers. But I think what you heard from the young woman is just this idea that I should be able to deal with things. I don't want to bother my parents with what I'm struggling through. And also this feeling of feeling alone in the struggles, but also not knowing where to go and get that support. And we'll talk more about how that led to our campaign. If you go to our next slide. One other interesting thing we did is we know young people are on their phones. And so we needed to find them on the places they spend most of their time and really think about how we can help them craft messaging. And so a lot of what we did was online co-creation. And what that looks like is asking some very candid questions. What would you be saying to your friend? How would you know if you were worried or if you were thinking that your friend might be thinking of suicide? We showed mood boards and various graphic and art styles that they could react to. And as I mentioned before, they're brutally honest and will tell you what they think, but it is so useful and it's a great way to kind of get rapid feedback. And then so much of our campaign language are often direct quotes we heard from young people through our co-creation, virtual co-creation sessions and in person as well. Next slide, please. And this is, we used a lot of this to really develop our campaigns. We worked with our youth advisory board to really make sure that, okay, this is the right direction we want. This is the look and feel we're going for. And what emerged was something very different than we thought. We're excited to show you it all if you haven't checked out our campaign earlier. But also what was key is really making sure that, we continuously build on youth input, from first listening and doing research with them to really thinking about what are those messages that we know that they want to hear, what they wish their parents would tell them, and really building upon that to develop our concepts and then really test them robustly across the state. This is just very high level of how we tested our creative concepts. But I do want to just really note that we worked with a lot of partners to make this happen, worked with youth 15 to 24 years of age. 43% of those youth self-identified as Two-Spirit LGBTQIA, and many of them had indicated that about 70% they either had current or former mental health challenges or experiences with mental health systems. And really, I think what was so key, California is a very big state. It's a very diverse state. Very different things going on in the North California to SoCal. So it was really important that we make sure we met with so many youth across the state and then did very specific intentional focus groups with Spanish-speaking youth and an American Indian, Alaska Native and tribal youth, because we knew that we really had to make sure that they felt okay with this concept as well. So if you go to our next slide. I do just want to highlight some of the partners that we worked with. These are youth serving organizations. These are not all of them, but what I will just highlight is a lot of time these are smaller organizations that are doing amazing work in their communities. And we wanted to make sure, we go in with the idea that we're not the experts in every single community, but we want to work with you to help adapt our messaging and create campaigns that resonate for you. So how can we work together? And it was no small feat. We engaged nearly 400 youth between just a few months of May and August of 2023 and 2024. This was a lot of work to do, but it was so worth it, and really trying to make sure that we had a message that we heard across the board, across demographics that resonated with young people. So if you go to our next slide. One of the other things I want to just highlight was the need to do really in-person co-creation activities. And when we say that, we really think about what are the tactile things young people can do. We talk a lot about how art can be healing. And so on the left, you'll see this is a beautiful collage that many young people did. They drew drawings of what they want with this campaign. What is their hope for the future? We had young people fill out talk bubbles, answering prompts such as, bother me when I'm feeling down, bother me when I don't say anything. And they would kind of let us know in their own words what that means to them or what I wish my parents knew. They curated our playlist. So if you go on Spotify, there's a Never a Bother playlist. It is all songs that young people suggested themselves. And then also the importance of storytelling. On the bottom right, you'll see one of our youth who shared their story. And what I think was so amazing and humbling in doing this work with youth is that they do want to share those stories. They do want to share those stories of vulnerability, the times that they sought help, and what was the positive effect that came out after it. Those stories are so healing. We did a lot of work to make sure we created those safe spaces for young people to feel comfortable to share them and really working with them. But that is one thing we've learned is like the power of storytelling. Young people want to share these because they hope that their story can help one person get better or make a call or reach out for help. Okay, next slide, please. And what we heard really resounding from all of this work is these three themes of validation, trust, and safety. And I'll talk about what those mean in a little. Next slide. So much of the barriers we heard from young people were the following: really thinking about these feelings of unworthiness, not wanting to be a burden to others, not feeling like the feelings of distress they have are worthy of support and that other people have it worse. And they don't want to add a burden to a family member, especially when we think about so many young people who have been here, whose parents have gone through various struggles. They don't want to be that burden or that bother. Stigma and shame, feeling really stigmatized or feeling ashamed to go out and seek help, knowing that mental health and suicide and even obtaining mental health support can be very stigmatizing in many cultures and identities. A really strong fear of feeling judged or having a negative reaction, not being listened to or understood. And also what happens when you do tell someone that you are struggling? What young people want to feel like they have a sense of control, and you lose that control when you disclose something like that often. A lack of knowledge, not always knowing what those warning signs are or what should have been said or done. But as you know, young people, the first person they're likely to talk to if they're feeling suicidal or having thoughts of suicide is a friend or a peer. And so a lot of people said that they would be there for their friend, but when we actually asked them, like, well, what exactly would you do and how would you help? That's where we saw that gap. There's a lot of intent, but just not enough kind of tools and resources and knowledge of what to do. Also concerns over confidentiality and distrust. When we talked about even resources like 988, fear of what's going to happen, who's behind that line, who's answering, how are they trained, what is really going to happen if I call that? And then also the consequences of seeking help. Lots of fear about parental or police involvement, fear of being sent to an institution or removed from their school or home. So when we thought about this, it really emerged that we had kind of two frameworks to think about how we are working with youth and how we are working with their friends. For young people, we really wanted to look at their beliefs, that it's okay to feel not okay. It's okay to get support. We want to build that knowledge of what they can do, and then hopefully work to change that behavior to help them make that next step to get support. And when we think about friends and peers, they want to help their friends, but they might be missing the exact tools or knowledge of how to do so. What are those warning signs of suicide? Helping build their confidence to intervene, and then ultimately helping them also help their friends seek help. And that was our framework for our youth at risk and their friends and peers. And this is what led to our strategy. If you go to our next slide, we think about our overall campaign strategy, you'll see some common themes here. We want to make sure that in our campaign, we are validating a young person's sense of distress in the context of their families, culture, and community, address any internalized stigma they have about feeling like it's not okay to feel not okay, and not wanting to be a burden. We want to appeal to their own sense of agency. We know young people really want to have a lot of control and sense of their lives, really give them the how-to support themselves and a friend, offer multiple ways for them to seek and receive help before, during, and after a crisis. There are warm lines, there are chat lines, there are text options. There's a lot of different ways and options to get the help you need, and letting young people have that sense of agency and choice. Building trust by being very clear about what happens before, during, and after you want to seek help. If you want to make that call or you want to talk to an adult, being very clear about what could happen, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And finally, sharing those positive and genuine stories. Young people want to hear these stories from people of similar backgrounds that look like them, have gone through things like them, of being helped while connecting to crisis and other support resources. Our strategy is really anchored in co-creation and making sure that youth have a seat at the table and their voices are heard and seen in the campaign, safe and effective messaging guidelines, and suicide prevention and crisis models and best practices. That is really what is at the heart of our campaign.
Thanks, Camelia, and everyone that came before me. Now I get the honor of showing the work. Next slide, please. If you look at this, is more of like a 10,000-foot view of the campaign before it ever launched, and what we would go live with. Obviously, the hub, the website, an example of a social post on TikTok, an outdoor board that we launched with, and then on the bottom right, you see a water bottle sticker that doesn't seem very revolutionary, but the more people we spoke with, everyone came in, and the young people we interact with in our lives, they customize their things. They customize their water bottles, their laptops, their journals, their notebooks. They put stickers on these things so that people know what they're interested in. And we thought, what better way for people to show that they're part of the campaign, that they want to be bothered, that they're your friend, that they're there to help, that they care, than if we produce stickers so people could put them in places where other people would see. Almost a way to get those valuable earned impressions and have people out there vouching for the campaign in the wild. And we've seen that run wild. So something that we saw and acted on. If you go to the next slide, please. We're going to do a deeper dive into the creative that we shared. But one thing that we heard, the summary of all that hard work that Camelia spoke about earlier, was for our work to be successful, there's three main bullet points here that I want to walk through. The first, validation and a sense of community are needed. Our youth resonated with concepts that felt authentic to their experience. of not wanting to be a burden or not feeling seen or heard by their parents or caregivers. Our youth loved messaging, conveying sense of belonging and a collective community, something along the lines of let's get better together. We heard that youth want visual maximalism and message minimalism. Those are tough ones for me to say. Words and phrases were secondary to the imagery for attention and eliciting positive responses. And last, illustrations are welcoming, motivational, and make tough topics and complex feelings approachable to our youth, regardless of demographic. Our findings showed that using images of real people was not required to capture their attention, and it sometimes could be polarizing. The graphics and characters put words to tough topics, questions, and conversations, and helped youth open up. To give you an idea of the responses that we got while asking it, you'll see some on the left. It makes me feel like I'm not the only one and I'm not a bother. It makes me feel like more people understand what it's like to feel suicidal. And last, I like this concept because young people feel like their feelings don't matter since they tend to get gaslighted by adult allies. They feel like they're a bother. So keeping these things in mind, we did a lot with this campaign, and I'm excited to share. Next slide, please. Obviously, our content hub and cornerstone is our website. Knowing that the majority of people coming to our website would come through their phones, we designed this as a mobile-first website and then backed into the desktop. You can see a snapshot into the journey as it scrolls. This is an award-winning website. Recently at the Shorty Impact Awards, this was recognized as best in class. And you can see the colorful trends, the illustrations, the characters, a lot of the content, both generated internally and externally hosted here for ease of access. We urge you all to visit this early and often. Next slide, please. Out of home, or billboards, as they're commonly known as, played a major role for us at launch. You can see some boards that were live at launch, in English and Spanish. Very important to note, this campaign was trans-adapted, not translated. Very key to know that all the audiences receiving this message had an impact to shape it versus creating it with an English-speaking audience in mind. And then adapting or merely translating. Not the case with this campaign. And you'll see some executions in Spanish below. I'll spend a little more time talking about that, but our familiar characters, the positive colors, the call to action, learn how to help yourself or a friend, start the convo. So you'll see these elements live throughout our creative executions. If you go to the next slide. One of the amazing things about this campaign is we literally learn new things every day. So as we shifted from the youth focus to the parent or caregiver audience, one of the things we heard repeatedly when we were asking and listening to that audience was, this is a hard conversation. I don't even know how to start it, where to start it. That could be the biggest obstacle for me. So we wanted to figure out what would be a way that we could show this audience when they're in an intimate moment alone, either driving to work, running errands, how simple it could be to start this conversation. So we came up with the idea to purchase sequential out-of-home billboards in 3 separate markets that reached primarily 3 different audiences and show a conversation taking place as the message recipient drove down the highway. They were not this close to each other. I can assure you there were some space in between them. But just to read this to you, to show this first one was the one that appeared in Sacramento. Message from Dad, "Hey, bud, you good? You hadn't been yourself." And Max says, "I don't know, Dad. We don't need to get into it." And then Dad says, "I care about you. Are you thinking about suicide? Start the convo. Go to neverabother.org, where there are resources on how to start the conversation, but also a lot of the familiar campaign equity, our characters, colors, logo, CTA website. And this appears, as I said, in different markets, tailored to that audience, either the name or the words used. Next slide, please. I'd mentioned this earlier, but everything that we did for this campaign was transadapted, not translated. Tu nunca eres una molestia, which is a translation of never a bother into Spanish, testing to make sure that that was resonant, that that did speak to the audience. And then you can see that with everything we did, there was always a version in Spanish for our audiences. So you can see the flip side of the coin from the first page to the second. And you can see these deliverables here. Very important to note. Next slide, please. So as this campaign began to take shape, we had a library of assets, starting with our characters, or our superheroes, which proved to be worth their weight in gold for us because they were adaptable and we could change them based on where they were appearing, who was using them, and just create a library of them, taking suggestions if there was a need for something else shown in this. You see another example of some text treatments, and primarily what this is for is as we gave this campaign away to the communities affected by this, ask them to create content, ask them to execute creative ideas on our behalf. We did want to maintain the equity of the campaign so that it all looked like matching luggage, so that people would know this laddered up to the parent campaign, but also giving the liberty and freedom for the audiences to make it their own. Next slide, please. So now getting into some TV. At launch, we focused on the youth affected by this audience. We will take you through that shortly. And then a few months later, we started to shift our emphasis to the parents or caregivers. And that'll be the second spot that you see. So Megan, if you could please share those. Thank you.
How are you really doing though?
Yeah, but you haven't been yourself. No, you're never a bother. Whether it's a low point, a crisis, or something you can't exactly put into words, get help for yourself or a friend at neverabother.org.
What's a good moment to talk?
Right behind you. Hang on just
Oh, no. Well, this is a good moment to talk.
How have you been doing?
And so is this.
I need to ask.
Grandma, I said I'm good.
This too.
Mind if I have a seat?
Make sure the young person in your life knows that they're never a bother and they can talk to you anytime, because youth suicide prevention can start before a crisis. It can start with
Whenever you want to talk. I'm here to listen and help.
learn how to support them at neverabother.org.
Awesome. Thanks for getting that up. Glad that you all got to hear it. Important work. You can see the difference between the youth focus versus the caregiver focus, shifting towards, how to have that conversation similar to what we saw in those sequential out-of-home boards. If you scroll to or skip to the next slide, Camelia mentioned earlier about the apprehension that existed about calling 988. There we go. So we created an animated video with our characters to show and explain and quell any uncertainties or fears about what might happen when you do call 988. So if you could play that, please. Whoops.
You'll hear a recording. You've reached the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Then you will hear some options. If you select 1, 2, or 3, your call is routed to the most relevant national crisis network, such as the Trevor Project Lifeline. If you stay on the line or press 0, your call gets routed to a 988 Lifeline center based on your area code. The average wait time is less than 1 minute. A professional or a volunteer will answer and ask you some questions. Answering these questions is 100% optional. You don't need to provide any personal information to receive support. They'll ask if you're having thoughts of suicide and how they can support you or help you support a friend. And then they'll listen. They'll provide support and share resources. The goal is for you to feel heard, understood, and help you stay safe. Most people who reach out to 988 are helped during the call without involvement of emergency services. And studies have shown that most people feel less overwhelmed by thoughts of suicide and more hopeful afterwards. Always remember, you are never a bother.
Awesome. We're going to skip the next spot, but one thing I did want to note was at launch, And having heard in our listening sessions and strategy how important it was for our unique or our disproportionately affected audiences affected by this to see themselves in the work, we shot this 4 different ways with a member of each audience featured in the spots so that they could see that this was relevant to them. Next slide, please. I'm now going to turn it over to Verinda Gupta, Senior Account Executive at Civilian, who has her fingerprints over everything we've seen today, and she's going to take you through our launch, earned media, and outreach.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here talking about this campaign that has truly been created with the youth that we've partnered with, and watching it come to life, and then also just sharing this with you so that you can take it in your own communities and apply the knowledge that we were able to gather. Next slide, please. So traditionally, California statewide campaigns are usually launched in Sacramento. However, knowing that our priority was to reach hard-to-reach audiences, we decided to launch our campaign in Auburn, California, with the help of Sierra Native Alliance. It is a community-based organization that primarily serves Native youth in Northern California. Forest Hill Bridge, a bridge located in Auburn, is unfortunately known as the site where a lot of Californians lose their lives to suicide. At our event, youth created positive messages that were attached to the bridge with the intent to help someone that might be having thoughts of suicide. Our other CBOs in the area attended and shared how impactful they were expecting the work to be for their communities and the youth that they serve. The event was catered by a local Native chef, and the event marked the launch of our efforts to reach our youth audience through our many traditional and digital media tactics. Next slide, please. Post-launch, we were reached out by many media outlets, such as Sacramento Observer, to learn more about the campaign. What makes this campaign really unique is that we media trained our youth advisory board to talk to media outlets about how this campaign came to be and how exactly this was original when it comes to a campaign about mental health. You can see Shaylin here talking to KCRA TV about his experience on the youth advisory board and what exactly the campaign means to youth all around California. Next slide. So when we were coming up with the campaign, we heard by our community-based organizations that they were also hoping for materials that can be given away at the events that they host. We created a lot of digital and traditional campaign materials that were provided to the CBOs, but then also to the county offices of education at the time of launch. They are all available on our Get Involved page, so I highly recommend checking that page out. The activity tip sheets that you see here are step-by-step ways to activate this campaign in a classroom or an after-school program. The posters that you see here share some motivational language about encouraging youth to seek help and not to think of themselves as a bother. There are also some tent poles that we have created materials around, such as Pride Month. You see some very specific resources on there that are geared towards that audience, but then we also have some tips for some allies on how to build that trust and provide that support to that audience as well. Next slide. So when we first started our campaign, we created a social media account on Instagram. And when you look through our Instagram account, you'll see that there's a lot of colorful, but still very informative messaging about warning signs, resources, how to have a conversation about suicide, and a lot more other posts. Once we started posting those, we got messages from our partners for ready-to-use social posts, and so that they can share them on their channels outside of just resharing the content that we were sharing. So we went ahead and started creating evergreen content, but then also content geared towards some different tentpoles, such as Pride Month, Suicide Prevention Month, May is Mental Health Month, to help them elevate the brand and the messaging in their own communities through their own channels. Like most materials, all of these assets are available in both English and Spanish. We've also created some palm cards that address the most commonly asked questions by the youth in the listening sessions that we had. Questions like, what do I do when I'm having thoughts of suicide? What do warning signs of suicide look like? How can I support a friend that might be going through thoughts of suicide? As such, informed our palm cards and all our other assets. Next slide, please. So when we launched the parent and caregiver portion of the campaign, we had similar listening sessions. Out of those listening sessions, we also learned about other commonly asked questions from parents and caregivers. And those questions were questions like, does asking about suicide put the idea in their head? At what age is it okay to talk about suicide? And then how do I know if my teen is just being a teen, or are they struggling with thoughts of suicide? So these were very common questions that we got in those listening sessions. And we used that information to basically address, use that information to address those questions in our content. We also created some affirmation cards that you see up here, and they're basically small business-sized cards that a mom or a dad can just slip into a lunchbox, or it can slide through the door to their teenager's door when it's bolted shut, just to make that initial signal for connection. Next slide. Something that's super unique about the social media that we have is that a lot of it is co-created by the youth. There are a few examples that Shaylin here will walk you through. My fingers are crossed, the audio will work. And if any of the, most of these submissions come from CBOs and other youth that are interested in the campaign, and then they basically share it, and then we reshare it on our channels. Take it away, Shaylin.
Thank you so much, Verinda. Yes, an amazing and absolutely unique aspect about this campaign is its co-creation element. And in my mind, I kind of like to split it into two aspects. So the first being that as a board, we were able to really have a say in what went into this campaign. Everything from the social media posts, even to what was my favorite, talking about the website, what we wanted to see if you're in a time of crisis. I think a big thing for us was like having a very simple and free-flowing website that could take you directly to the resources that you needed. And things even down to the colors of the website. What colors did you see, or what little animations or little graphics did you see here on this page? Things like that. And I think most importantly, the messaging and what type of messaging and in what way it was delivered. So even through things like the Spotify ads that we have for the Never Bother campaign, and hearing the two voices talking to each other, or even the order of what is said during a call, things like that, that we actually had to say in, and that we had we could give our input on. And then the second aspect of the co-creation, which is some of my favorite, is youth from all over the state, from various organizations and independently, have really been able to create art and content that revolves around the campaign and its messaging. Next slide, please. We've had the opportunity to join together and have some statewide youth convenings in 2023 and 2024. Got to meet really great people, like-minded people from different organizations all across California, and we have a video to show that.
Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to Tomorrow Together 2024 Program Summit for the Youth Suicide Prevention Program. Throughout this past year, there has been a lot of progress, a lot of growth that has been made for the program, for the campaign. We have a campaign launched and you are creating that content.
It is exactly what we dreamed of. It was exactly what we imagined. And you've taken that dream, that imagination to a new level.
A lot of times you try to attach yourself to quantifiable metrics, or like, how do you grade yourself? One of the things we use is impressions. How many times was a message delivered? The number that we have to share today is 340 million, which is, I hope that seems big because it's gigantic. So
we spent a lot of our first phase of this campaign talking about that message, that peer-to-peer. What do you say to someone that's your friend or someone you know? And now we're really trying to talk to those parents and caregivers. What is the message that we want them to hear and say, what we want them to do when they're talking to young people?
My mom has no idea what depression is. She just thinks if you got depression, you're lazy.
In a Mexican household, you have to be strong, independent. You can't cry because why are you crying? Like, they needed to see physical harm in you in order for them to validate it. And that's our culture right now.
You know, they're listening to me, they're hugging me, but they don't know what the next step is. They don't know if they should talk to me. They don't know if we should go see a therapist. They don't know if it's like a conversation we can have because they don't have that knowledge about mental health.
You don't have to be perfect, but you got to be ready to walk that tight line and put any of your weaknesses or whatever it is aside to be there for that person. But that's mental health. That's everything.
We've done our best to listen to you every single step of the way from the start of this campaign, and it's our intention to keep doing that for the rest of our time with Never a Bother. So please keep sharing yourselves and your work with us. We learn from every single thing that you share.
We can all collectively do something, take an action to build a better tomorrow where no young person in the state of California, yes, but around the world is scared to speak about their feelings or is scared to approach someone because they think they are a bother. That is not the case. No one should ever feel like they are a bother.
Thank you so much. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, so as I said earlier, we've been able to have a lot of youth co-created content. And the great thing about social media is there are many different platforms. So the videos that these kids make from various organizations and across the state, we have Two Feathers Native American Family Services, Jail Guitar Doors, Youth Revolutionary Front, all with, very unique individuals who want to create content for the campaign and around the Never a Bother messaging. And they've been able to do that and post on things like Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, et cetera, et cetera. Anywhere that kids are posting nowadays, you can see Never a Bother there, essentially. So next slide, please. And just to show some examples of youth created content, here we have a film from Mixteco Indígena Community Organizing Project. And this was a TikTok that they made. So you can play that.
¿Alguna vez se han preguntado qué es lo que los jóvenes quisieran que sus padres u otros adultos supieran? Hola, me llamo Yesenia.
Ricardo.
Soy Yajaira P. Guadalupe Velasco. Graciela Velasco, mi nombre es Leslie y lo que quisiera que los padres supieran es que nosotros tratamos nuestro mejor esfuerzo en la escuela. Los hijos no les gustan que le comparen a otras personas. Comparar tus hijos a alguien puede causar inseguridad. Eso causa que uno no se quiera a sí mismo y quieran ser alguien que no son. Puede contener lesiones graves como suicidio, ansiedad y depresión. La salud mental no es un juego. No nos griten.
Parents shouldn't yell at us because then we end up feeling like we're not enough. Makes us feel like we're less.
La escuela causa estrés y no solo es tener un lápiz en la mano, ya que también contiene ventajas y desventajas.
Por favor, aprendamos a dialogar con nuestros jóvenes.
Yo importo.
Te quiero.
Soy capaz. Me respeto. Me admiro. Yo me valoro.
Thank you so much. We can go to the next slide. This film was from San Diego Youth Services. It's called, of course, You Can Bother Me. This is one of my favorites. You can play it.
Of course, you can bother me when you need encouragement. I'm here to push you in the right direction. Of course, you can bother me when you need a shoulder to cry on. I got two. Of course, you can bother me when you feel like nobody's listening. We all deserve to be heard. Of course, you can bother me when you need some help. I'm here to lend a hand. For two. Of course, you can bother me when you need a safe space. Everyone deserves to be seen.
Of course, you can bother me when you need some company.
Hey!
Thank you. Two really great examples of what youth have been able to, how they've been able to creatively express themselves with the campaign. And then we also have two more for Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. You can play.
So my roommate kind of locked himself in his bedroom for a few days and just has not come out.
Hey, I'm heading to the corner store to grab a snack if you want to grab something with me.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
I just don't know when this started. And worse off, I don't feel like I know how to help. I went to Never a Bother's website to see if I could get any tips.
Do you maybe want to look at some resources together? I know if I was going through it, you'd be there for me too. Go to neverbothers.org for more resources.
If you've struggled with your mental health, you've probably been told to focus on self-care. You've tried meditation, exercise, perfecting your night routine. You've tried writing in a journal every day to magically fix yourself. The bottom line is you can show up for yourself in big and little ways, like doing self-care, keeping a journal, and setting goals. But being the person always correcting yourself, guiding yourself, and soothing yourself is a huge responsibility. It's okay if showing up for yourself isn't enough. If you're struggling to find that person to confide in, try Teen Line. It's an anonymous, non-judgmental space for teens to access peer-to-peer support. Remember that you are not alone and you are never a bother. You can find even more free resources at neverbother.org.
Thank you so much. Really great examples of work and that incorporated the resources, that incorporated the messaging of the campaign and just did a really fantastic job. So thank you. Go to the next slide. Okay, now I'll pass it on.
All right. So another unique aspect of this campaign really centered around our use of influencers. Having heard directly that prior work just did not resonate and the intended audiences did not really find it relevant to them, we asked them, who would you trust and pay attention to in delivering this message? Unprompted from our co-creators, but then also on top of our list was someone that has done some great work and is a big mental health champion. Megan Thee Stallion was requested and selected as our mega influencer. Next slide, please. So Megan Thee Stallion is not just a Grammy-winning artist, but also a philanthropist and entrepreneur that has been a vocal supporter of mental health among Black and Brown communities for many years. She has publicly acknowledged and supported LGBTQ communities and has mentioned that they're at disproportionate risk for suicide. So we knew that she was the right person for this job. And most importantly, we heard directly from our youth advisors that she would be a dream spokesperson and influencer for the Never a Bother movement. Obtaining government approval for Megan Thee Stallion was no small feat, but we are super duper grateful for our colleagues at CDPH for being champions of truly listening to what youth voices were saying. Our partnership with Megan Thee Stallion yielded a video on our website and several social media posts on Instagram and TikTok. It also resulted in a People and Billboard magazine coverage, along with numerous other earned media outlets that wanted to cover this. This partnership has been a huge success for the campaign and for the state, as we keep hearing that from our youth, and they really do acknowledge that they didn't want this to look or feel like quote unquote government campaign. And with this partnership, they really felt that come through. As you can see here, our partnership brought in more than 6.6 million impressions from the content both posted by Megan and by our channels. We saw about 108% increase in the page views on the website, and it has been covered by more than 26 news outlets. So when we pitched this to Megan Thee Stallion, the way our campaign was created was just as important as the output, and this has really helped foster her and many other partners' support for this message and for this campaign. Next slide, please. Now I'll pass it back to Pete to walk us through some quotes and some numbers that really do embody the impact that Never a Bother has had so far in the community.
Awesome. Thanks, Verinda. So Verinda started to touch on impressions, and anytime we do work like this and put campaigns out there, we want to know roughly how we did. One of those key metrics is impressions since launch. If you could go to the next slide, please. Heard me on the video earlier. I think at the time we were around 6 million. You can see things have changed. We're up to 725 million impressions since launch, which has exceeded our wildest dreams. You can see some quotes here. I came across Never a Bother and I love the message you guys try to send out about mental health. Ran across your ad on Instagram. I love this campaign. I love the message. It's hard to reach out because you feel nobody cares or that your problems are insignificant compared to the world's issues. I want to help. I want to be the person. So you can start to see the same language, the same feedback that we heard when we tested. So it knows that this was authentic work. Going on to the next slide. You can see that we've distributed over 500 Never Bother physical toolkits statewide. So that's how these groups and these people activate the campaign on our behalf, how they make it their own, how they create messaging resonant to their unique communities. And then you see two quotes here, and I've said this a lot. I've learned so much from this campaign, and I think we learned a new way to gauge success, and that is how many people reach out and want to work for the campaign and want to be a part of it. We've had over 300 direct messages, emails asking. I love this work. You can see it embedded in these quotes, the quotes on the prior page. I love this campaign and how impactful it is. Aside from sharing the campaign, is there anything I can volunteer to help with, like behind the scenes, files, communication? Hello, I've just seen your ad on YouTube, and after checking the website, I had to reach out. Your approach visually is so very comforting and welcoming, so shout out. Big shout out to all the creators. I wish my parents would have known how anxious they made me growing up and how uncomfortable I was in my own skin because of the words they chose to use. So this is the ultimate success metric. And one of the reasons in the spirit of why we're here today is to share this with you to hope that you can yield similar results. So we've obviously made a lot of friends and a lot of allies and advocates for this campaign. And to close, I'd like to share one of our new friends and her thoughts on the campaign. If you go to the next slide. Hit play, please.
It took me a long time to be comfortable talking about my mental health, especially, you know, being a Black woman. I feel like you see every Black woman that's in your life, they're the glue that's holding their family together. And you never get to see them be weak, or you never get to see them be vulnerable because they have to take care of so many people. But I finally decided, like, asking for help doesn't make me weak. Going to get the help gave me the tools to be stronger. Hotties, you are never a bother.
Thanks, Megan. Obviously, the numbers spiked when those videos went live, but a tremendous partner of ours and a great way to end our presentation. Next slide, please. Again, if you want to follow our channels, once again, here they are. To search Never a Bother just about anywhere, and you're going to find us. And last, next slide, please. If you have any questions on how we did this, problems you face in executing this that we don't get to today, I myself and a few of the people that spoke today work for Civilian, Marketing for Good, a nationwide agency based in San Diego, California. And all that we want to do is continue to see work like this around the country and in the world, as early indications for us are this is impactful and effective. Thank you all so much. Now we can turn it over to the Q&A.
Okay, thanks so much, Pete. And thank you all for sticking with us on this presentation. Apologies for some of those sound hiccups, but please know this will all be shared to everyone who attended. It will be on our website tomorrow. And so many of the videos are on our YouTube, our social channels, and more. So we don't have enough time to go through all the questions, but I think we'll aim to answer a few here live. And for those that we don't answer, we will be posting a Q&A also on our website for anything that we weren't able to answer. One question I did want to start out with, and I'm going to actually punt it to my colleague Verinda, was how we built our social presence and how we grew it. So Verinda, I'd love for you to share a bit more about that and kind of touching on what we did for our channels, but also the CBO and tribal partner work.
Thank you, Camelia. So to summarize a long strategy document for social media, I would just say that we started really basic. We focused on the key messages that we were trying to promote through the campaign, but in a very visually appealing way. We really did use our characters really heavily from the beginning, making sure that it's bite-sized information that people can easily share with their friends and family, making content that is easily shareable in terms of like using some trends that are ongoing and adapting that into a mental health and suicide prevention language. So people are still able to relate it to the rest of the content that they're seeing on the internet, but it still it's still made from the lens of mental health and suicide prevention messaging. So using what already works on the internet and incorporating that with the key messages that we're trying to push out has been really working for us so far. Then again, community management has been a huge part of why we've had people come back commenting again. People have really stuck with the content that we've been pushing out. They've been resharing it on their stories is because we have been responsive to their comments. We make very, very active, we have active plans in place where we reach out to people when they do reach out to us, responding to any comments that they have, if they send us DMs, responding to any questions about resources, but then also if they're just curious about where they can like find more videos that we're posting, just sharing them online with them has been super great for like creating the sense of community on the pages. Another big one I would say was launching Megan Thee Stallion as an influencer. It really did show that the campaign is a legitimate but also a cool way to learn about mental health resources and suicide prevention resources. So that really did help us boost some engagement and impressions through that. With that being said, we're going to work with a few more influencers down the road for May's Mental Health Month. And then we're also going to do some tentpole based work for May's Mental Health Month as well. We're going to push out specific messaging. So keeping messaging refreshed, but then also sticking to the basics that work has been pretty impactful so far.
Thanks so much, Verinda. And one thing I also just want to, I know there's a couple questions just asking kind of about our current climate and how this campaign and these larger efforts at the state play a role in some of the resources that are available to youth and young adults, as well as parents and caregivers. And so I would love to pass it to Dr. Sood to answer some of those.
Sure, happy to do so, Camelia. I mean, this campaign started and continues to proceed following the data. And the data clearly show that suicidality is not evenly distributed among this population, right? I've showed you some of the statistics there that show that disproportionate impact, and so it merits a disproportionate response. And if anything, you know, some of the other questions in the chat are about expanding the work to include additional subgroups and prioritize additional groups in the work because it's important and it's needed. And the response, of course, needs to be culturally nuanced and understood by different communities, and sometimes that takes different messaging. So I think that's the way we're attempting to continue to proceed in the state of California with regard to that. And then you also mentioned a comment about additional resources out there. So what you can find on the Never a Bother website is links to other resources that include talk lines and helplines. But I do want to highlight in particular new virtual service platforms that the state of California has also stood up so that no matter where you are in the state, if you're a young person between the ages of 13 and 25, for example, you can connect to a coach, like a live person who's trained in mental health to help support you walking through anything that might be on your mind. And that particular service is called Soluna. You can learn more about it at www.solunaapp.com. It's one of the responses to the Q&A, but you can also find it in the Never a Bother resources section as well. You can make appointments. You can drop in and see a coach. You can also get some navigation support to providers and licensed clinicians that are available in your area covered by insurance, should you need additional support beyond what the coaches can provide you. So hopefully that helps as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sood. And those apps that we mentioned are interspersed throughout our campaign website, our social channels, but you'll also see them on our website under Get Help Now. I see one other question from Jody Marr. Thank you. Are there printable graphics, promotional items, or digital toolkits in addition to the physical toolkits? Yes, we have everything we've made is also digital and print ready. And should you want additional sizes or anything like that, we're happy to send those to you and get those to you. That's been really key. A lot of that co-created content you saw was specifically because we created almost like a style guide, an assets guide for a lot of our partners so that they can download, customize the characters, customize the messages, add their logos and more. So we are excited for many of our partners to do more of that. Okay, I think we have maybe time for just one more question. I think there's some sort of general question to think about a lot of the activations we've done and kind of how we've been working into partnering with various influencers and so forth. And so I wonder if Shaylin, you'd be willing to kind of talk about some of that work in the Youth Advisory Board, and maybe Brenda and Pete can jump in. But how are we thinking about the partnerships that we pursue?
Yes, hi. Can you say that one more time from your
Sure. No problem, Shaylin. How is this campaign and how do we work with our youth advisors to think about the partnerships, be it influencers or events or engagements that we pursue?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Great question. So basically, obviously as the youth board, we had a big say in what we as youth wanted to see. And we always have constant conversations, monthly meetings, and each of those meetings was always talked about, what influencers would you like to see? And we actually got to answer with our own favorites. For me, I know I've said a few in those meetings that I personally enjoy their content and watch their content, and some of them I even wanted to hear their take on, mental health and what work they're doing as far as suicide prevention. So when talking about like influencers and who we see and who we wanted to see, we always were able to mention those people, and we were able to kind of talk about those from our own, personal opinions, which I think is very unique. A lot of my friends, who I grew up with, listen to, like, for example, Megan Thee Stallion, right? Listen to her music. And for me, it was actually super important that someone like Megan, who is a Black woman and can actually talk to Black youth and reach Black youth, it was super important to have someone like her on the campaign. And yeah, it just gives voices to people I grew up with, to me, to my friends, to my community. And so I hope that kind of answers the question, but that's kind of, talking about it all the time and being active on social media and looking out for those types of influencers and who's really speaking to youth at this time. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Shaylin.
I can add some color to that. Thank you, Shaylin. That was great. And then, so the question is, how do we know where to be? Like, co-creation has come up multiple times during this webinar. We literally had tremendous partnership for everything that we did, asking, where would you want to see ads? Where would it resonate with you? What should the media buy look like? What should the colors look like? Everything in this campaign, if we were to hire an influencer, who would that be? Who would you trust? Who cares about this? There was another question in there from Luca about Coachella. What was the motivation for partnering with Coachella? Just asking our youth, where are you active? What is cool? Where are people your age going? Where would be an amazing place to reach you? If you could go somewhere, where would that be? And for that particular instance, it's not so much it's not a sponsorship at all. It's actually creating a mental health experience at the festival where people can learn about the campaign and we can actually offer help. So it's just really asking the people that mean most to us, the people that this messaging is for, and then acting on it. And I hope that answered the question.
Thanks so much, Pete. I think we have time for one more. There is a question, maybe two more, about how we think about promoting 988 to BIPOC communities, especially given there is so much fear about police involvement and kind of the consequences of that, and knowing that it varies across where you happen to be, what state you're in. I'll just say one thing that has been so important is just that youth voice. We can say many things in our campaign, but I don't think anything will be as powerful as a young person talking about a good experience they had calling 988 and what that looked like or what happened after that. One of the things you'll see in our YouTube videos, our YouTube channel, is a lot of testimonials from young people who are candidly sharing those experiences and what that looked like when they called 988 and what that helped. And it's so important to make sure that we are featuring young people who they feel like they're represented, if they see these messages, to really help break down those barriers. So that's a key piece of our strategy, is to really elevate voice through storytelling. So that you'll see, and you see a lot of that in our social content as well. I think it's going to be an ongoing challenge, but this is one way our campaign is trying to tackle it. I think one of our last questions before we end is, can young people still get involved? Yes, there's a lot of ways, because we really wanted to make this campaign be something that lives beyond our work with the state, the social media channels. There's a lot of contests and creation opportunities that you can take part of. What I would encourage you to do is, if you'd like to learn more specifics, please email us. But one thing I think that is beautiful about social media is everyone can go on and share a message or post a message and kind of really contribute to the conversation. So please feel free to do that, or just check those out. We look at everything that young people post. So thank you. And with that, I realize we're at time. Thank you all so much. We are so excited to share this with you. We have many questions we didn't get answered, but we'll put a Q&A on our website. So please do follow that, neverabother.org. And I think we want to just make sure we leave everyone today with the message that it is so important for us to let all the young people in our lives, be they our child, a friend's child, or any other young person we interact with, to let them know that they are never a bother. It is so critically important. And we hope this campaign can help give you the tools to have those conversations and make sure we validate them all. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.